It's the stuff of rural legend, Loch Ness monsters, crop circles, Bigfoot. But what about big cats? Now, on average, you won't believe this because I didn't when I read this, there are between 5 and 10 sightings of big cats reported every single day here in the UK. But are there really pumas and panthers prowling around Leicestershire and Rutland? Well, Nigel Spencer is the founder of Leicestershire and Rutland's Panther Watch, an organisation that investigates reported sightings of big cats in the two counties, and he joins me now. Afternoon, Nigel.
Good afternoon.
Just quickly, big Leicester City fan, aren't you? So you can't wait for the new season.
No. I try to get to the games when I can, but I listen when I'm away.
Good
Usually
lad.
on a hillside trying to get Radio Leicester in Yorkshire or somewhere.
Oh, there are other ways. I'll tell you about it later on. Let's talk big cats. Oh, you set up Panther Watch.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, what happened was my father, David Spencer, they've got some land over at Nossington, and at the time he was a lecturer at DMU, which obviously nothing to do with big cats, but it had a bit of an effect on the sighting. And my grandparents had seen this animal in the field a couple of times, and we'd been quite puzzled because there was no livestock anywhere near where they were seeing this animal. And they said it was the size of a calf and black. And we joked that, I wonder if it's this big cat of Rutland, the beast of Rutland, that it was being called at the time. This is really back in the early 90s when the cat was first being seen. And they got a clear sighting one day, and the police came over, and they were a bit concerned, and they came over and checked a load of the barns and that. And we were still looking at each other thinking, this is daft, this is, it's impossible. How can you have a big cat, being brought up in the countryside? It just didn't make sense. Anyway, my father then had a sighting a few months later, and the animal ran out the gateway and nearly knocked him over. He was stood in the drive, and he thought it was a horse. It was making so much noise coming down the field because it was a frozen day, and he was just going to go and close the gate because he thought the horse was going to get out. And this animal came charging through, and as he stood there with the dog, he realised that it was this big cat. So he stood there, shouted at it, raised his arms because he was concerned it was going to actually collide with him. And it lifted its head up and swerved at the last second in front of him, and its tail sort of went across his face, and it bounded down the road.
I'm stunned that he actually, in the story, that he actually managed to have the wherewithal to think about raising his arms. And because a lot of people, I would freeze.
I know. Well, he's recounted
freeze.
this on television a few times on documentaries, and, they've reconstructed it. And where he was, if he hadn't done that, it would have knocked him over because it got nowhere else to go. But it had its head down as it was bounding along, so it wasn't really... It was almost on autopilot. It wasn't looking where it was going, and it was just starting to get light. So the lights were on the house, so you could see it quite clear as it came out the gloom into him. But the amazing thing was the dog didn't bat an eyelid. He's got quite a big dog at the time, and she just froze basically and just stared at it as though she'd encountered it before.
And how long ago was this?
This was about 93, back in 1993.
And so your interest probably enveloped from there on out?
Of course, from there, immediately the police were back out again, very, very interested. We worked with the Leicestershire wildlife officer at the time, was Inspector Neil Hughes, and he was very, very keen. But they were getting sightings and reports, and what happened as well was Radio 4, I think, came and did an interview, and a few of the TV people came out as well, and it sort of snowballed, and people started phoning in with sightings saying, well, we've seen it, and the police were sort of getting reports, and they said, well, do you want to start investigating? So we did.
When it first happened, were there a few that sort of went, oh, yeah, all right then, mate, yeah, of course we've seen the panther.
This is the thing, we were like that, but after that, it was like, my God, these things really do exist, and Dad was quite annoyed in a way because some people didn't believe him.
Yeah.
And, of course, with his standing at the time being a lecturer, people did take him very seriously. He was chairman of the parish council and everything as well. So, not that it should make any difference who you are, but people sort of said, well, hang on a minute, there is something in this now.
What about the sightings in Rutland? Because I mentioned before, between 5 and 10 sightings of big cats every day in the UK.
This is across the whole of the UK.
Across the whole. Is there a sort of community that lets you tell each other that you've spotted them?
Yeah, we were one of the first groups to actually have a website. So we put a website out. I actually used to do quite a bit of radio stuff as well over at Pebble Mill with Tony and Julie on The Late Show, and they were one of the first people that had me on the radio, and I don't think really anybody was really talking about big cats. So, it was a bit jokey when we went over there.
You expect to see them in the zoo, and that's pretty much it. They're from overseas.
Yeah. And we also had very early on in the early days. We tied up with Drayton Manor Zoo, who've got two in captivity, and amazingly, their late zookeeper and their current keeper have both seen these animals in the wild, and one in Leicestershire, actually on the A42 near Ashby-de-la-Zouch.
Right.
So when you've got people like that are used to working with these animals, that see them and are quite happy to go on camera and explain that they've seen them, you know, it's when people turn around to me and say, well, are you sure it wasn't a fox? Well, hang on a minute, this guy's a zookeeper that works with these animals, and you've seen it sort of 5 feet from him.
There's always that air of doubt, isn't there? Are you sure it wasn't this? Are you sure you just...
I mean, there was a very funny tale from the late John Fone at the time, who did an awful lot with the BBC on documentaries that we did in the 90s. And he said at the time, he recounted a tale where he actually got a phone call from a lady saying that one of his cats was out. And he said, no, they're both sat in their enclosure. And she was very insistent, not too far from the zoo at Drayton Manor, and they went out to have a look. And he actually ran into the wood and followed this black leopard into the wood, and then realised nobody else had followed him, so he came out quite quick. But he said, all his training disappeared, and he suddenly realised, this isn't a clever idea chasing this big cat, and I'll come out.
So you are a big cat investigator. What role does that undertake?
Well, I'm an engineer. I don't make obviously any money out of doing this. It's just a voluntary thing. But when I go out, if we get a report, say for instance somebody sees an animal in, for instance, Saffron Lane or something, we get sightings there occasionally where they jump over the railway. Off the railway track into a garden. Right. If there's some evidence or something, maybe a paw print, or it's scratched a tree, or maybe even you get a case where something's been killed by a big cat, like a rabbit or something, you've got some evidence, you can go and have a look and start to piece together. And sometimes it can be quite easily dismissed. People do mistake foxes. They do mistake even bin bags. Sometimes had a case of a guy on a mobile phone looking at a bin bag for about 20 minutes and then realising what it was. Hang on a minute. No, it's not a big cat. Sorry. I'm sorry to ring you. But you know...
Especially when it's 30 foot in the air when the wind starts blowing. Yeah.
But there's other times where there is evidence available. We investigated a report some years ago up in the Vale of Beaver with a horse that had been badly attacked. And now this horse was about 17 hands high, which anybody in the horse community is quite a big
steady
animal.
Size.
Yeah, and they were adamant nobody would have even got into the paddock near it. It was quite an aggressive animal. So for this animal to have scratched it right on the top of its back, all the way down, it must have jumped up on top of it, and we think that was a puma that did that. In fact, the vet said as much. So
what sort of breeds are actually out there at the moment living in the wild?
Yeah, just for people that don't know what they are, unfortunately the papers quite often say, has a puma been seen here, or puma. The black leopard or panther is a leopard with a black coat. So in the sun, you can actually see the spots underneath. It's melanistic. Right. But it's got a black coat. Then you've got a puma, which is a mountain lion, which looks like a lion. So sometimes you'll see reports, people think they've seen a lion on the loose, and that's a puma, American, or cougar. And then you get the lynx, which is a bit smaller, doesn't have a tail as such, and has pointed ears.
When people do say, I'm sorry, I could talk about this all day, I'm absolutely fascinated. Yeah. If someone does spot something, if they do, especially in the open, and they're worried, or they actually want to know more information, what do they do, Nigel? Get in touch with you, or is there a way they can go about it?
Yeah, there's various ways. They can go onto our website, which is bigcats.org.uk. There's a national site as well, which has a sightings form, so it doesn't matter where you see the big cat. If you go on there and report it, it all gets logged on the national database, and that's bigcatsinbritain.org. Or the W's before, obviously. Or you can ring my father on 01664 454 218.
Just repeat that for me.
01664 454 218.
And if you've gotten it, I'm just actually on the website now. You may have heard me typing away. bigcats.org.uk. Rutland and Leicester Panther Watch. Some really impressive pictures on the homepage as well. And there's all the click here for certain pictures of the big cats as well, and the latest local panther reports for the end of August 2009. So it's pretty well updated all the time with latest spottings and sightings.
It's actually out of date at the moment, as you probably see.
Do you Go on. I don't even know what year I'm at the moment.
Yeah, no, I have to spend a bit more time on it. I mean, it doesn't mean we're not reporting. We do a lot with the national group, so everything that's reported in goes onto the national database with the national group. But I must update our own website as well. But
there's also a link on there, though, to Big Cats in Britain as well, which is bigcatsinbritain.org or locally bigcats.org.uk. And just give us that number one more time if you would, Nigel.
01664 454 218.